As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study Exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening once again. This day, Tuesday, 17th day of January 2022, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to another episode of ICAN on Air. And today, like we've always promised you, we've come with another topical issue that is very germane to our profession and the business environment at large. And the topic is the evolving role of compliance opportunities for accountants. And to do justice to this today is no other person than Mr. Femi Jaiyeola FCA, who is a C-level risk and compliance executive with about 25 years cross-border experience in financial services industry, of which 6 years was at senior level position at leading international bank in UK. Currently the group chief conduct and compliance officer of Access Bank, with responsibility for adequacy and effectiveness of the bank's conduct and compliance program, providing independent and objective advice on compliance risk, issues and concern, and managing the bank regulatory and reputational risk in Nigeria and 12 bank subsidiary in Africa. Prior his joining Access, he was the chief compliance officer of Sterling Bank PLC and Diamond Bank PLC, where he played critical role in influencing and driving change in the compliance culture. He worked, like we said earlier, in United Kingdom at Standard Chartered Bank as the head of internal control for Nigeria and West Africa, Citibank London vice president, internal audit with responsibility of leading multidisciplinary team to provide independent assessment, and Barclays Bank London as audit manager with responsibility for leading team to provide independent assessment. He has a track record of leading high-performing team and is a strong advocate of the use of data analytics and technology in transforming business processes and compliance risk management practice to achieve effectiveness. He is a fellow of our great institute, your institute and my institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Also, a member of the board Corporate Finance Faculty of our institute, fellow of the Compliance Institute of Nigeria, director and chairman of the Finance Committee of CIN, honorary senior member of the Chartered Institute of Banker of Nigeria, fellow Institute of Credit Administration, certified information system auditor, that is CISA, and member Human Dignity Subcommittee of the Working Group Project for Private Sector Implementation of the National Ethic and Integrity Policy 2020. He has a bachelor's degree from University of Ilorin and master degree in finance and investment from University of Edinburgh. Sincerely speaking, I have a very versatile, a vast man that will be discussing the topic of today, which is the evolving role of compliance, opportunity for accountant. Like I keep telling you, this platform is open for you to promote your goods and services, your products at any time at a very minimal cost, so that you can have the global patronage that is expected of your goods and services. Permit me to quickly go on a very short commercial break. And when I return, I'll be coming in with our guest for today as we do justice to the topic. Don't go anywhere. Please stay tuned. I'll be right back. Welcome back, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome our guest for today, Mr. Femi Jaiyeola FCA. Good evening and welcome to ICAN on AIR, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Sesson. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to join this show. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. And without wasting our time, we are moving straight to the business of the day, and we are discussing the evolving role of compliance, opportunity for accountant. Let me start this way, Mr. Jaiyeola. The word compliance is commonly within the professional environment. And today, we are blessed to have you take us through this concept. Our global audience will want to explore the opportunity through your wealth of knowledge and experience and dexterity. Let me start by saying, in a simple term, what is compliance and what does it mean to be compliant?
Thank you so much. Once again, thanks for having me. So compliance I think, is a word that we use in our everyday life. So when I go about every day, people use the word compliance. I need to comply. I need to comply. But the context of this discussion, compliance is about having a process or a structure or programs that enables an organization, one, comply with all relevant laws and regulations guiding their business, and also having the structure, the processes, and the programs to ensure that the various parts of the organizations comply with internal policies set up by management in a short form. So in this context of this discussion is around ensuring that the organization you work for has a function that builds the programs, the structures, and the processes that ensures that that organization complies with all relevant laws and regulations guiding its business, and also ensure that individuals within the organization follow the company's organization's policies, procedures, and standards. So it has a lot of components in terms of
That, that,
compliance.
that's a brilliant way to start. We will come to some of the components that is embedded inside it. Well, we have an understanding of what compliance is about. We want to know who qualifies to be called or addressed as a compliance professional, and what are their responsibility. I mean, the compliance officers.
Okay, so a compliance professional is, we can look at it from two perspectives.
Okay.
A compliance professional is one that has been designated to be directly responsible for ensuring that those processes and procedures put in place to comply with those regulations happen, they monitor it, and they enforce it. So there's three elements to it. You need to define the process, you need to implement the process, you need to monitor the process, you need to enforce the process, and you need to escalate the process. So if you have been officially designated as the person responsible for those activities, then you are the compliance professional in that organization. But the flip side is that there's a concept that everybody is responsible for compliance generally. Because the compliance officer or compliance professional cannot be everywhere in the organization. So everybody has a responsibility for compliance in any organization. But the person directly responsible officially to drive that process is the compliance officer.
Very brilliant. That is to say, when you talk about compliance, you have to define it, implement it, monitor it, enforce it, so that everybody can keep in line with some of the things that are responsible for that organization. I proceed. The word environment today has largely transited into digital space, and I love it. While I was reading your brief profile, that you like driving the process with technology. How has this transition affected compliance on one hand and the role of compliance officer on the other hand?
Okay, thanks for that question. I think it's very relevant in today's world. I'm sure if you look over the last 2 years, everybody has changed in terms of going digital. So not just the banks, even individuals. When COVID happened, people were locked up in their houses. They couldn't go to the banks. They couldn't do things that they would normally do normally. So every business has gone digital. So what that means for the compliance professional or the compliance function is that the function itself needs to transition to that mode. So if I give you a typical example, in the banking industry, even though there was lockdown imposed across the country, people were still opening accounts with banks digitally. People were still doing transactions digitally. People were still working from their various homes without going physically to the office. So as a compliance professional, your responsibility has not changed. You are still responsible for ensuring that people follow the rules and regulations that guide the business, as well as the internal policies of your organization. So what that means for you as a compliance professional is that you need to adopt your approach to align with that transition to the digital space. So for a compliance professional, so things around account opening, for instance, we had to build processes to monitor that process. So in the past, for instance, we used to go to people's houses to say, look, let me go and verify somebody's address that actually lives there as part of the account opening process.
Your KYC.
Exactly. But with the advent of accounts being opened digitally, that process too had to change. So we're thinking about using geotagging your residence or your location to verify where you are, right? Instances like providing your ID, you just upload your ID and we do the verification of that ID electronically as well using APIs. So that role itself has transformed in terms of the approach to monitoring those processes. So that's one of the things that impacted the compliance function. The second bit is about what does it mean for the individual compliance officers. So the skill set needs to change as well. So it's not just the traditional compliance approach anymore. You need to have compliance professionals that are digital focused, so that they can think and adapt their compliance processes to those digital changes that have happened over the last couple of years. So today in compliance, we are not looking for the traditional compliance person that is a lawyer or someone that spent several years in a particular function. We're looking at young people that are agile, that are digitally minded, that can understand the digital space and can come up with processes that can help us monitor those things that are happening around us.
That's a brilliant word, and it's to tell us that everything keeps evolving day by day, and digital space seems to be having its way in all we're doing, and compliance is not exempted. Let me use this opportunity once again to welcome all our audience who are connected globally. We have them from the northern part of the country, the eastern part, the southern part, the western part. I've seen our people from Ibadan, from Ogun, from Ondo, all the way from Abeokuta. I've had from Kano, Abuja, from Maiduguri, Benue, the eastern part, Enugu, Anambra. Everyone connected to make sure that they have a full grasp of what it is, the involving thing that compliance is all about. And let me use this opportunity to say, Mr. Jaiyeola is very much ready to attend to your question. So bring it on board and trust that your anchor will always put it across for you. I proceed, Mr. Jaiyeola, while I welcome the question of my audience for today. Given our basic training as accountants, taking the compliance responsibility with finance space of the business environment, what is your objective assessment of the adaptability of the finance professional to the digital space as it relates to compliance?
Thank you so much for that question. So I'll take myself for an example, right? So I'm a chartered accountant first and foremost. If I look back at my career, I probably spent more time in internal audit and external audit and finance, which is typical terrain for chartered accountants. But here today, I've been a compliance professional for the last 8 to 9 years. And what that tells me, and I think the message for everyone, is that our training as chartered accountants gives us an edge in the compliance profession, right? So some of the things we've learned around being analytical, paying attention to details, being open-minded, being thorough, being diligent, those are the things we've learned in the course of training as an accountant. And those are attributes that a compliance professional needs. In terms of the digital space as well, fortunately, ICAN has gone in that direction as well in terms of one, the syllabus for ICAN itself and the other training programs being rolled out by the Institute. And what that does is that it helps to prepare accountants for that digital evolution that is taking place. So what that means is that, one, as a chartered accountant, you have the professional training, you have the attributes to work in that compliance space. And fortunately as well, with the direction that ICAN is going as well in terms of digitalization and revising the syllabus to take this into consideration, and the training, it also prepares the accountants for the evolution happening with the compliance space in terms of this digital approach as well. So if I look back at my career, I think the leverage I've had in terms of adapting to the compliance with an evolution in that space can be tied back to the training I had in terms of my training as a chartered accountant. So those attributes around attention to details, being analytical, being good with numbers, being open-minded, being professional, skepticism as an auditor, those are the things you need to have a very good career in compliance. And I think I want to use this opportunity to implore our accountants to explore the compliance function. There's a lot of opportunities out there today in compliance. Compliance is a role that came late into the game compared to internal audit or external audit. But today, if I look at the banking industry today, compliance is probably one of the most important roles in that industry, not just in Nigeria but globally today.
It is gaining its ground, and most people will not know because before now we don't know what they call chief compliance officer. But while I was rolling through your CV, and I saw chief compliance of those days is internal auditor or external auditor. But
Exactly.
now we have compliance officer, which is giving us a leeway because of the analytical mind that we have as chartered accountant. We are open-minded. We are very thorough, well-detailed professional. And I think with what you've said, our people should start looking in that direction. Don't just look to be a finance manager or an internal audit. Look for that vacancy of chief compliance officer so that you can work at the level at which Mr. Jaiyeola is. While I still welcome the question of our audience taking this, Mr. Jaiyeola, we do hear about budget padding, embezzlement, poor job execution for those that are in the project line. Does it mean that the compliance officer was on sabbatical leave or he is asleep? Or what actually happened, sir?
I can't say categorically, but I think it's a function of the society itself. I don't think it's entirely fair to isolate one individual and say something failed and then try and isolate it to one individual. The way I look at it is a collective failure by the entire system and our value system as a country. I think we're at the point where it's not one individual that's going to solve the problem. It's going to be a collective effort. So to go back specifically to that question, where was the compliance officer? It's possible, I don't know for a fact, that those concerns are being raised by the compliance officer. It's possible it's been discussed at the senior levels, but there are instances where those things don't actually, things can be overridden in those kind of situations as well. But then, as a professional, what you need to do as a compliance officer is at least make your position very clear, document your concerns if you have any, and make sure it gets to the right level within the organization. So if you need to flag it to the board committee, you can flag it. If you need to flag it to the executive committee, make sure you flag it. But there are instances where you flag those things and those things are not acted upon. And in that case, you can't really isolate one individual as a compliance person and say, look, where was this guy? It's possible those concerns have been flagged and escalated to the right authority, but then nothing was done about it. But the way I look at it as well is that I think it's a more of a wider problem in the society that we need to collectively work together to solve rather than try to isolate it to the compliance officer in a particular organization.
It's a wider scope that we need to collectively integrate to and make sure we solve the problem rather than pointing accusing finger to an individual who must have carried out his own work, and some people just decide to turn the deaf ear or close their eyes towards it. I have a question from our ardent listener. This man is a five-star general when it comes to ICAN on air. He doesn't miss it every Tuesday and Thursday. And that is Fagbola Adeniyi from the Asian city of Ibadan. He's asking the question, compliance, compliance, compliance. Does the benefit of compliance outweigh or equate the cost of compliance if subjected to the cost-benefit analysis in the short or long run in an organization?
Thank you. I think that's a very valid question, and I think it's a question I've come across several times. I think the challenge for the compliance function is like this, right? So if things are going well, the question is asked: what exactly is the relevance of compliance if everything appears to be going smoothly? And if things go wrong as well, the question is asked: why didn't compliance pick it? So it's a very challenging profession, to be honest, with my listeners today. But if I look at the cost benefit analysis, right, it's always difficult to tie the benefits to the cost when there are no losses to report on. So if there's an organization today that doesn't have any penalty from any regulator, there are no conduct issue, there's no reputational damage, then one can ask that question and say, look, what is the benefit of this? But we're in a world today where one little mistake, one non-compliance issue can actually bring the entire organization down. It has happened to several global large organizations where one single conduct issue brings the entire organization down. We've had situations where CEOs and executive members of large corporate bodies are forced to step down due to compliance-related issues. We've had instances where banks or companies are penalized hundreds of millions of dollars for penalties. When those things happen, there's no conversation about the benefit of compliance because the benefits are very, very apparent. But when things don't go wrong, people can start asking that question: what is the benefit of having a compliance function? But for me, apart from the monetary side of things, is around the value, the reputation of those organizations. So even if you don't suffer a penalty, if something goes wrong, these days of social media, you're all over the place, all of a sudden, your brand gets to suffer. It begins to impact revenue. So for me, you cannot oversize the importance of compliance within an organization. And when that culture starts building within the organization, it gets transited to the larger society. So it's an opportunity to actually have compliance in our culture so that we can reform the entire society, not just within a single organization. So that's the way I look at it from the larger context of things. Once we begin to build that culture within our different organizations, it transmutes itself to the larger society, and we are all better for it. So for me, the benefits cannot be quantified.
The benefit of compliance cannot be quantified because when there are no penalty, when there are no sanctions, you ask yourself, what is this man doing? Just paying him salary for nothing.
Exactly.
Forgetting that that's the man that entrench the culture into the people that makes it to go the right way that the management team have actually set it to be. I also have Femi Jaiyeola all the way from Lagos, Nigeria. He's asking that can you state the distinct difference between internal auditor and compliance officer?
Okay, thanks. So I'll look at it this way. So typically in an organization that is well structured, you have the three lines of defense. Three lines of defense in the context of protecting the organization. So the first line is the process owners. So those that actually process or do the day-to-day activities. Then you have the second line of defense, which is compliance. So what compliance does is to ensure that the first line is doing their work properly. It also ensures that we have the structures and the processes in place to enable them do the things properly, able to identify when there are exceptions, and able to escalate those issues for resolution. The third line of defense is now internal audit. So what internal audit typically do is to check that the first line, the process owner, the second line, the compliance team and other control functions are working effectively so that they can now report independently on the overall control structure within the organization. So compliance is more closer to day-to-day activities to ensure that things don't go wrong, to ensure there are processes in place, to ensure that the regulations are well captured. Internal audit now comes in and checks that the process owners, the compliance team are doing their work properly so that the overall organization is protected. So that's what I would say is the distinct difference between compliance and internal audit. So compliance is more closer to where those activities are taking place compared to the internal audit. So it's like having a house with security men, first gate, second gate, and third gate before anything happens to the people inside the house. Yeah. So the compliance will be at the second gate, internal audit will be at the third gate before they actually get into trouble.
Sincerely speaking, the way you simplify the differences between internal audit and compliance officer, I should have visited you as my audit and assurance lecturer those days when I was having challenge, because you simplified it and a layman can actually understand the differences. I have our own AAA Dr. Abel I say, all the way from Abuja, and is asking to ensure the effectiveness and cloud of compliance. Asking what level should the head of compliance be placed in an organizational structure relative to head of finance and head of internal audit?
Very good question. I'll take it from two perspectives. So, in an ideal situation, the level should not matter. It should be about your role and your function in an organization. So, if I look at my time when I was in the UK, right, it wasn't about levels, right? It was about what was your responsibility. So, as a compliance person or an internal audit person, I had my responsibilities clearly spelled out to me, and I had the authority to actually engage with people within the organization. But the reality is that in our own cultural environment, levels matter.
Hmm.
So, if you look at the banking industry, for instance, the CBN has said that the chief compliance officer must, at the minimum for the big banks, be a general manager. And that is the highest level after executive directors. In fact, CBN went further to say there must be an executive director responsible for compliance to ensure that that function has the highest representation in the organization. So that's CBN for you in terms of their own direction. But typically, it shouldn't matter. Ideally, it shouldn't matter. It should be like, look, this is a chief compliance officer. Irrespective of his level, you need to look at his responsibility and the role that has been attached to that individual. But at the same time, I realize that in our cultural environment, levels matter to us.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
ideally, the head of compliance should be at the consummate level with other senior functional heads within that organization for him to
Hmm.
be able to drive that compliance culture in the organization.
That is a very brilliant way to respond to Dr. Abel as saying all the way from Abuja. Before I go to my question, let me quickly attend to Mr. Akim Tairu from Lagos, Nigeria. He's asking what's the relationship between the chief compliance officer and the company's secretary, more so when issues of compliance with laws, regulation, and karma as it affects the company.
Very, very interesting question. So I'll go back a little bit in terms of how the compliance rule has evolved. So in the past, right, things around regulations, CAMA used to be done solely by the company secretary. In fact, in some organizations today, even some of the international banks, right, compliance reports, compliance and legal or company secretary are, are lumped together. But if I go back to the banking industry today, CBN has clearly separated the two functions.
Hmm.
So in the past as well, a lot of the compliance professionals were actually lawyers,
Hmm.
right? But with the evolution of the role, it's beginning to be separated. So you go to a number of places today, the company secretary is different from the compliance uh, individual. But in some other organizations, they are lumped together because historically, the company secretary has been responsible for laws and regulations guiding the affairs of a particular organization. But today, in most places, they are different. But what tends to happen in practical terms is constant collaboration by both parties. So when it comes to matters of board governance arrangements, board meetings, share capital issues, share capital construction, things like that are typically handled on a day-to-day basis by the company secretary. But when you look at the primary regulations guiding that activity, so if I look at the bank, for instance, so if I look at CBN regulations, those are typically handled by the compliance person. If I look at things around interaction with Nigerian Stock Exchange, when there are capital interaction with SEC on capital raising, interactions with board members, those are typically handled by the company secretary. But like I said, it differs from organization to organization. Some of them are matched together because historically that function has been handled by the company secretary.
Hmm. That is a brilliant way to explain the question as we have from Akim Tyro. While I proceed here, while you were talking, we've heard about regulatory compliance, HR compliance, data compliance, financial compliance, health and safety compliance, political compliance, even religious compliance. I want you to roll us through some of the role of compliance as it relates to individual lives, corporate organization, and the nation at large.
So let me start from the individual life. So in our various homes, we have rules, even though they are not written. So we have children in the house. We have rules that are not written. So they need to go to bed at so and so time. If they go out, they need to come in at so and so time. You need to wake up at so and so time. There's some we're going to eat collectively. So we have rules that guide our activities on a day-to-day basis at our homes. So compliance in that context is to ensure that we follow those things we've agreed internally as a family.
Hmm.
But then they might not necessarily be written rules in most cases. So there's a culture of compliance even within our household. Even as individuals, there are some things we've said we won't do or things we will not touch. I don't want to take alcohol, for instance. It's not written anywhere, unless you're probably Muslims might have a point around that. Or I don't want to leave the house before 7 o'clock in the morning. It's not a law in the country, but I've said this is what I don't want to do, and I try to comply with it for any particular reason why I've decided that's the case. So it applies to me as an individual. We have things like that at the family. At an organizational level, in an organization, for instance, we have policies that define how the organization will work on a day-to-day basis. And we need to ensure that employees follow those policies so that the organization is protected and does not run into trouble. At a country level, we have a constitution. We have laws and regulations that guide our day-to-day activities, and we need to comply with them. And we have compliance officers in courts in the form of the police and other law enforcement agencies that ensure that when we don't comply with those laws, then they need to take action. But where we've had challenges as a country today is non-compliance with those things that have been prescribed in our constitution or there are laws that guide our day-to-day activities. So if we start from the individual and we start imbibing our compliance culture from the individual to the family to our various businesses, organizations, it's going to translate to the entire society.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then we can start talking about reforming our country as a whole. Because if we comply with all the requirements of our constitution, if we comply with all the rules and regulations across the country, across the various sectors of the economy, this country will be a better place for everyone. So compliance is something that radiates not just in our individual lives, but how we relate together as citizens of this great country, Nigeria.
That is a brilliant way to have it, Mr. Jaiyeola. And for those of you that are just joining us, I've been engaging Mr. Femi Jaiyeola FCA on the involving role of compliance opportunities for accountant. And I can tell you, if you are just joining, you might need to go and watch this program because it's been very educative. You will not know the importance of compliance until you are being slammed a sledgehammer. That's what addressed the question of Agbola on cost benefit analysis. You won't know the benefit until when you have a sledgehammer on you. Then you give kudos to Mr. Jaiyeola, who is the chief compliance officer, the group chief compliance officer of Access Bank. I proceed with this question, Mr. Jaiyeola. As a compliance coach, what are the main areas of compliance in workplace, and what are the factors that are needed to be included when you are considering a compliance plan? I know we have a compliance plan that guides the organization. Can you take us through this, sir?
Okay, so a typical compliance program has some pillars around it. One is one to even understand the applicable rules and regulations that guide the organization, as well as your internal policy. So typically, you have a what we call a register, if I can use that word, that clearly stipulates all the requirements that you need to comply with and all your internal policies. So that's one thing. You have to have those rules and regulations clearly spelled out. The other thing is that there needs to be communication of these rules or these policies to all the employees in your organization, right? So one is to establish the rules. One is now communicate those rules or policies to the all employees within the organization. The other bit is now to have a training session where you're actually telling people what those things mean to them on a day-to-day basis. How
mm,
does these things impact their activities or their processes on a day-to-day basis?
mm,
The next component is to have a monitoring process in place to confirm that those policies or those procedures are being followed on a day-to-day basis. And what that helps you to do is to identify exceptions and able to develop plans to fix them before they degenerate. That bit is very, very important because what I tell people most times that before you have a big penalty or a big issue, there will have been little signs or indicators along the way, but they were not just identified, or where they were identified, they were not dealt with decisively on time. So apart from the monitoring is around the escalation. So you have instances where there are significant issues you need to bring to the attention of executive management or to your board so that they can step in and intervene where necessary.
mm. Yeah, that's great. And let me quickly take Musa Shonde's question, who is asking how can a CCO, that is the Chief Compliance Officer, effectively manage the conflict that arises from protecting its employers' action and fulfilling the requirement of the rules issued by the regulator.
Thanks so much, Mr. Musa. That's actually a very brilliant question. It's something we face to face. That's what I call the compliance officer's dilemma. And it happens on a day-to-day basis because one, your organization is paying your salary and you want them to keep making enough money to be successful. At the same time, you need to ensure that they don't flout the rules. Interestingly enough, the regulator expects you to be their mouthpiece or their eye within the organization to flag any concerns as quickly as possible. So that's a typical compliance officer's dilemma. How do you strike the
Hmm.
balance between what your organization wants to do or what actions they've taken or want to take, as well as ensuring that they don't flout the regulatory requirement that guide that particular activity. But what I
Hmm.
always tell people and members of my team is one or two things. One is around you need to be able to build credibility within your organization, right? And for you to build credibility, you need to have demonstrated that over time. So even if your employer wants to do certain things, if you tell them that, look, this is not what we should do because of this, and this reason, if you have built that credibility, that message gets bought into easily. The other flip side as well is that you need to have a very good relationship with your regulator so that when you have concerns around some of the things your organization has done or your employer has done, and when you approach them, because of the relationship, because of the credibility you built with the regulator, you're able to engage them to manage those conflicts. But trust me, those conflicts will happen, and that is a typical compliance officer's dilemma.
Hmm. An officer dilemma that he can easily resolve if he builds the credibility that is expected and has a good relationship with the regulator that regulates his activity. I'll take up this question, Mr. Jayola. From everything we've been saying, it appears that lack of compliance or even weak compliance could breed massive consequences. Our global viewers, we want to know what are the possible consequences of lack of compliance or weak compliance in a business environment.
Consequences can be unimaginable at times.
Hmm.
We've had instances where organizations have practically disappeared because of compliance issues. You've had careers that have been terminated abruptly due to compliance issues. We have people that have lost loved ones due to compliance issues. So the consequences can be fatal to organizations, and it's happened, and it will continue to happen if things are not dealt with in the right manner and at the right time as well. So getting a penalty is even better. At least you can pay and you can still continue your existence, but you can actually lose your license. And when you lose your license, the entity doesn't exist anymore. So the regulator can actually seize your license, and once that's done, you have no basis for operating anymore in that particular business. And that's why it's important that the culture in every organization sends the right message, and it needs to flow from the very top within the organization, not just the compliance officer or the chief compliance officer. The tone at the top is fundamental to driving the compliance culture. And once that culture is embedded, it makes it easy to drive that state of compliance across the organization. The other challenge is around having the resources to drive that compliance culture as well. So you can have the tone, but you need resources in terms of the systems, the digital tools you need to use, the people you need to hire as well. And that's where I'll go back to that point I made earlier on about opportunities for accountants within this space. There are loads and loads of opportunities. Today, I can tell for a fact that banks are looking for compliance officers. And this is a role that cuts across geographical boundaries. If you go to the UK, to the US, compliance professionals are highly sought after. Compliance officers typically get paid more in those countries because they've seen the consequences of compliance and they appreciate the role of compliance officers. So accountants that looking at opportunities to leave maybe internal audit or finance, compliance is a fantastic area to go into. And like I said earlier on, the attributes we have as chartered accountants puts us at an advantage in terms of being successful within that compliance role.
Hmm. That's a brilliant submission by our guest. And as my fellow chartered accountant, or even non-accountant that are here, there is great opportunity for us. Compliance officers are sought out there. Try and key into it, not just internal audit or external audit, but be the compliance man. Mr. Jayola, I want this objective and non-biased assessment. What can you say about the assessment of professional compliance in Nigeria and then the performance of our National Economic Council as a leverage on the poverty in Nigeria? Your fair and non-biased assessment.
So just to confirm, what is my view around compliance as a whole in the country?
Yeah.
So if I look at the culture, I think we've made progress over the years, but we're not where we
Okay.
need to be compared to other parts of the world. So if I look at the UK and US, for instance, right, a lot of the things they do is they are self-regulated, right?
Okay.
They tend to self-regulate themselves. And when there are issues of non-compliance, the consequences are very clear, right? And it's no respecter of any persons or any office. So when you go foul of the law, you face the consequences. And when there are consequences for non-compliance, it drives the culture. So if you go to parts of the world like UK and the US, even if you're the president, if you don't comply with a particular thing, you'll be forced to resign. But if we come back to Nigeria, we are not there yet. But like I said earlier on, we've made some progress. I think we are beginning, or we have started that journey in terms of driving a compliance culture or imbibing a compliance culture. But we still have quite a bit of long way to go to get to where some of the other countries are. But like the common saying says, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So
With
we're
a
taking those
step.
baby steps. It's just for us to keep driving and pushing it, and having the right people in the right with the right skills in the right positions, ensuring that the rules are very clear, where there are consequences, where there are cases of non-compliance, the consequences are clear, and they are free of any religious or ethnic bias, and then we just roll on from there.
Hmm. That is brilliant. Permit me, because I've been able, I've had opportunity to guest professionals like this, and at times we delve into politics because we've been made to understand that politics determine the policy, and if you don't get involved in the politics, you might have a wrong policy that will run you down as an organization, and there may be nothing to comply with because you did not get involved at the beginning. And this will take me to this question that we are actually warming up to elect a new set of leaders politically. Assuming that we have one of them, one of the key aspirants watching this program, what will be your suggestion to them on compliance in ensuring good governance and economic recovery in and for Nigerians?
Thank you for that. And I think what I always look at it is that what I've found, not just in Nigeria, but not just in Nigeria generally, uh, but even in various organizations, is that those policies or those rules exist, right? But it's around adherence to the rules we've agreed amongst ourselves and enforcing those rules. So today we have the best of economists in the country. We have the best of scientists in the country. But I think where we struggle as a country and as a people is around complying, if I can use that word, with the rules and regulations and our constitution, and then enforcing them where there are instances of non-compliance. So, irrespective of who gets to win the next presidential election, I think one thing I would like to emphasize is that we need to adhere to the rule of law. We need to comply with the rules of law. We need to comply with our constitutions. Where there are instances of non-compliance, we need to enforce consequences
Hmm,
beyond ethnic or religious bias.
hmm, hmm,
We can't have a system where there are no rules. Fortunately, we have defined the rules for us. We have agencies in place to enforce those rules, but we need to just act on them.
hmm, hmm,
Let's adhere to the rule of law.
hmm,
Let's enforce consequences where there are not instances of non-compliance. And I think once we deal with that problem, generally speaking, I think we'll begin to go make some progress, even on the economic front.
I can tell you it's been a very insightful time, very educative. Guesting Mr. Femi Jaiyeola FCA, who have been doing justice to the evolve of compliance, the opportunity for accountant. Before I take my last question, I'm sure you know this part of the world. We love certification, like tomorrow will not be. I want to ask, are there specific certifications available to becoming a compliance professional?
Yes, there are local certifications and there are international certifications. So one of the certifications we have is a Compliance Institute of Nigeria, which is um, one that you do some exams and you get qualified. Also, you have international certifications relating to financial crime, money laundering, and general compliance as well. So there are lots of certifications out there. There are lots of training out there, and there are a lot of courses that people can go into as well. I think maybe feedback to ICAN as well, whether they can introduce more of compliance, even if it's not in the syllabus, maybe training seminars, so that people can really understand compliance. They can broaden their horizon in terms of career opportunities out there. I think something that ICAN can take on board because there are really great opportunities in compliance, and it's a role that cuts across geographies. So even with all this jackpot syndrome that are happening, compliance has been seriously impacted in Nigeria because those guys quickly get opportunities out there because it's the same concept at the end of the day. It's around understanding the rules, having processes in place to implement them, monitoring and escalation. So those are skills that are actually transferable. Also, the good thing is that it's now beginning to evolve across industries as well. So the banking sector is more prominent, but with the manufacturing sector is getting more prominent, in the pharmaceutical industry is getting more prominent, in the oil and gas industry is getting more prominent. So those skills are actually transferable across geographies and across industries. So I think it's something that my fellow accountants or budding accountants should explore.
Yeah, sincerely speaking, it's been very educative having you on board. But I would not let you go because I always give this room. You started it, but I'm sure you will entrench it more. In closing, Mr. Jayola, ICANN is always open to ideas that will positively advance the growth of our members, the accounting profession, and the Nigerian business environment. We want your advice and suggestion. You've given us one of entrenching into our syllabus. What ICANN needs to do on our discourse of today, the evolving role of compliance and the opportunity. You've mentioned one, but if you permit me, you can give us one or two so that we can use that to wind up in 2 minutes.
Okay, so I think the other thing is to explore partnership
Okay.
with professional compliance bodies. We have one in Nigeria, of which one of the directors there. I think there are opportunities for us to collaborate
Okay.
in terms of how maybe concessions around training programs, concessions around fees for the professional examination. So I think there are opportunities around collaboration. So with all the collaboration ICANN is doing with other professional bodies, I think they can begin to look at compliant professional bodies as well. I think that will help the institute as well as the members of the institute as well. So I think that's another area that can be explored. I think the other thing is to look at opportunities where ICANN can offer its members opportunities to do internship in some compliance functions in some organizations, right? So we have a lot of ICANN members in practically every industry, in practically every organization. So maybe that engagement to say, look, can we have accountants not just go and do internship in finance or in internal audit or some of the audit firms, but actually do internship in in compliance related roles, so those opportunities within compliance can be harnessed by the institute and its members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Femi Jaiyeola FCA, for sharing your evening with us on ICAN on Air. It's been very, very insightful, very educative, opening our eyes to where we don't have it. And to all our viewers, we want to appreciate you for making our time. It's because you are there. That's why we are here. And we want to believe when next we call on you, Mr. Femi Jaiyeola, you definitely make yourself available to come and enrich us again with some of the knowledge that we need. Before I round up, let me quickly take this announcement that we've started the new year. And like Fagbola, we always assist me to count. This is like the fifth episode for this year. But we want to encourage you as member of the Institute. Have you paid your subscription? You know how important the subscription is to the Institute. Please make sure you do that. The payment platform is open to all. You can do it for the associate member, it's 17,500. For the fellow, 32,500. Make sure you hook up with the payment channel, pay it because there are benefits attached to the payment of our subscription that we do annually. Also, let me also announce to all that yesterday, the Institute has rolled out the nomination form for election for the 2023 election. Please visit the website, get some of the guidelines and pick up the form if you are interested. Also, the portal for the fellowship conferment is open, and we encourage you all that are due for fellowship to hook up to this and take the highest cadre of our institute. which is fellowship. On that note, we have come to the end of the show. A special thanks to the Governing Council of our great institute, led by Malam Tijani Musa Isa, and the Registrar Chief Executive, the Chairman of the Editorial Board, and all editorial member. Until I come your way again on Thursday, stay connected and make sure that you are available. I remain your host, CA Olusegun Okwade FCA. Till Thursday, stay cool and God bless.